Today's session is called Our Noospheric Future. It's part of a three-part series called From Fragmentation to Coordination. And I want to welcome those of us who are part of the first cohort of the Metaweb certification course. I hope you've all been having some fun reading the book and beginning to answer the questions. We'll talk a little bit more about the course, the next cohort, and finishing up at the end of the presentation. For now, let's jump right in. As I mentioned, this is part of a three-part series called From Fragmentation to Coordination. The first week was from attention to agency. The second week was building the meta layer, where we really focused on the meta layer primitives and the different things that make the meta layer unique. This week is Our Noospheric Future. Today we're gonna talk a little bit more about the problem, what the real problem is, and that is coordination. It's not just a technology challenge that we're facing. We'll talk about the opportunity, and that is for us to develop a whole new layer of capabilities, a whole new layer of civilization. We'll then go into, well, what are the ingredients? We're seeing this as intentionally building infrastructure, civic infrastructure, trust infrastructure, and we're seeing that involving digital artifacts, memory stewardship, bounded AI, context, governance, among other things. And the new capabilities that we're wanting to bring forward with this work is for us to be able to think together, coordinate, and to remember. These would be collective capabilities. And then we'll have an invitation that speaks to how people can finish up the course and or get active in other ways with respect to the meta layer process. Are there any questions before we jump right into the presentation? Take that as a no. There's a question that we are wanting to address with this session today, and that is, well, what kind of future are we actually trying to build? This is a really special time. I've mentioned this a couple times, I think maybe even in the first course, that for the first time ever, not only is the cost of creating software trending towards zero, but at the same time, not that many people realize that we have so much capability in our hands right now. And that leaves us in a very interesting place where we can build the things that we weren't able to build before. There are things that couldn't possibly be built because there wasn't a funding model for them. There wasn't a way to bring on teams and get them focused and get them building. There just wasn't a way to finance some of these projects that can now be built. And so we're now faced with this question. Well, if we can build things, what do we actually want to build? Let me ask you all another question. This is a question I'd actually love to have you all answer.
Do you want them to answer in the chat?
How about just raising your hands? Let me take us off screen share for a moment. So who feels optimistic about humanity's future? You can put your answer in the chat. You can raise your hand. If you're visual, you can go ahead and use the reaction button. All right, I see one. So Rick, the two optimists are optimistic. Okay, well, so wait, is this it? There's two people. Oh, is Sarah, are you feeling optimistic as well? Not very. So Val says not very. I'd like to be more positive, but it seems like things are not so great. Let me get back into the chat. Okay. Is there anyone else who said anything? Karen says optimistic with guardrails, and Carlos says he's optimistic. So I'd like to have a couple of these optimistic people tell us what they're optimistic about. 30 seconds. Dee or Rick?
I'll start. I just think that of all of the problems that have been not only identified in the book, but the things that I'm casually experiencing myself, there's a way forward. One, because I understand things a lot better than I did 6 months ago. And there are technically some things that we can do. But I think our biggest hurdle, which I know that we can find a way forward, is to change how we behave, how we interact with the internet. And it's not just us that are the educated few, but we need to make it viral how we change our behavior. And I think there's a way forward to do that. There's methods for us to get there, but we really need to laser focus on what we have as priorities. But I'm optimistic because there are technical ways of accomplishing what we want to do with these tools. The organic changes, though, need a lot of cheerleading, motivation, incentives. And I just feel overall there's going to be a brighter future.
All right, let's hear from Rick. Or
I'll say something. I'm only at the end of chapter 3, and kudos to you, David, for writing this book, because you've covered 1,000 things more than I had figured were items, if you will, relevant to this overall situation we're in. And I'm only on chapter 3, and I've got 10 more chapters to go, so it's just dazzling. But I think by itemizing all of these different bad things that can happen, we can prioritize how to resolve a solution to that. I think everything that we do in society without the internet involves a personal interaction, a registration, to driver's license to drive a car, and things like that. So right now, none of that exists really in the internet. And you even point out you can be as fake as you want to be by having a fake Gmail account leading to a fake Facebook account, and on and on. So that kind of stuff needs to be fixed. We need to know who people are that are saying things. If they want to remain anonymous, then we'll have anonymous places. But generally the internet is not an anonymous place. It's a place people that rely on for a lot of business and activity and information and things like that. And for anonymous people to be able to influence what's going on, that's got to be fixed. And I think your itemization of all these things in this book is a great step towards getting that done.
Well,
and that's why I'm optimistic, because once we identify the problem, we can fix the problem.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there one more optimistic view that someone would like to bring forward? Karen,
Sure.
perhaps? Okay. Carlo? Yeah.
Yeah. As you know, I've been working on HEAL. Our words are different, but the objective is the same. Where you talk about fragmentation to coordination, I speak about fragmentation to wholeness. Yeah. And self-adaptation is part of wholeness. Yeah. Where the parts interact and just adjust. Yeah. But the responsibility doesn't lie with us who want this. The responsibility lies on the part of the parts that form the whole. Yeah. And so HEAL, the approach that I'm developing, I'm currently writing a book on Rio mode, which is the language aspect that extends beyond our normal day-to-day word use, extends inward to make the inner and outer into a continuum. So wholeness in our society starts with feeling whole ourselves. Yeah. And so to make that viral, that is the objective that I'm striving for. And the meta layer is very much part of that. That's also integrated in the book that we are currently writing.
Awesome. Okay, so we have some optimists, right? And we have some optimistic views out there, but notice that most people are not feeling so optimistic. I see Leandra says hopeful, but not optimistic. Trepidatious, that's quite a word. Karen says optimistic with guardrails. She's written things about AGI algorithms. We'd love to see that. That would be really interesting. So,
David, would you allow those that have a different point of view to make remarks on that? Because we want to know what they're concerned with.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Would anyone like to step up and
I'll go.
Provide it? Okay.
Okay. So my concern is the feasibility of it because of what we're up against in order to make those guardrails and those concerns that Rick was mentioning with who are we really talking to and things of that nature, because the people who basically run the internet right now profit off of our kids clicking on things that they should not click on, right? We know there's a big thing going on in the back end that has to do with, exploitation of children. And profiting off of them that way. I mean, there are some kids who are flat addicted to the Fortnite bucks, the V-Bucks, the Roblox bucks, and so if those guardrails come up, people are going to lose money. So that's why I'm pessimistic about it, because of who we're up against as just us, and we are the minority. But it's very challenging when you don't have, billions of dollars backing you up to go against them and say, hey, enough is enough. And we can't have people we don't know, trying to converse with our kids and things of that nature. And also like our elderly parents and extorting them for Bitcoin and things like that. So that's why I'm a little pessimistic about it, because I just feel like we're just being stomped down so that people can continue to exploit and profit. So get your cape, David. Go out there and go save us.
Yeah, thank you, Val, for that
You're
counterpoint.
welcome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to say that I am as well cautiously optimistic. I think that there's a lot of tools that we have at our avail now, and that AI is one of them. It's double-edged, of course, but at the same time, I think that we're starting to see some pathways towards a future that we want, and we need to figure out what we want to build, though, right? That goes back to this question: what kind of future are we trying to build? So I think we'll go through this a little quicker than I had initially thought we might, but let's do this popcorn style as a group. I'd love to hear from all of you, maybe once, and yet very quickly, what are the three most important things, or what is something that you all think humanity must do together to reach in an optimistic future? Whatever you see that optimistic future to be, even if you're not optimistic, but if you were to think about let's say a pro-social future, what are one thing that we must do together to get to that pro-social future? Just popcorn. Who's got an answer?
Communicate.
Communicate. Okay, great. Another?
Practicing community.
Okay, what was the first one? Go say that one.
I was going to say we need to keep AI from leading to the Terminator situation.
Okay, great. And there was another one. Someone else was speaking as well.
Yeah, I think it's practicing this with community, finding community, building those numbers to be able to actually make an impact. We can't do it alone. And so doing it together, understanding that people are walking towards the same vision. We all see that there's a gap where needed, and we're just really like at the cutting edge of like where we can really innovate by your standard, by how you open up the call, talking about we're at a time where, we can develop software with little to no money and stuff. It's just primed for opportunity.
Thank you. So coordination is another way of saying what you said. At least that's what I heard. Are there some other things? Come on, let's
eliminating cancer. When we see it pop up, we should not be so forgiving and allow other doors to be open for that same cancer to take root. We need to be able to shut that down and not allow it again.
So we've got some other ones in the chat. I see different ways to interact with resources, new economic systems, invest in education and empower young people so every person has the opportunity to innovate, lead, and create positive change. Respect each other from Fasa. The previous one was from Renad. The one before that was Karen. Then Leandra says shift power from corporations to people. Renard again says, work together across cultures and borders to solve global challenges through cooperation, empathy, and shared responsibility. Micah says, invest in people and the planet, quality education, accessible healthcare, environmental sustainability, and equal opportunities. And what I want you all to notice is that these are not technology problems, right? These are actually, for a large part, what's going on? I'm trying to, sorry about this. Trying to get my slide share back up. Here we go. We had a number of different things: coordination, cooperation, stopping cancer, shifting from people to the power from corporations to people. All of these things, well, they're not simply technology problems. These are coordination problems. Social problems. Yeah. So this is a different class of problems. We can't truly solve this just by making. We need to have techno-social solutions. And that's what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. In my mind, a really interesting question is to ask, how might 8 billion people become better at thinking together? Anyone have any thoughts on this? You've done some reading, we've talked about the Metaweb.
I'm going to volunteer
Say it
something,
again.
but I think when we have 8 billion people, we all have to sing off of the same page, that we have a common language, a taxonomy where we can exchange ideas and begin from. I think part of our big challenge is language and communication. And if we can settle on a universal language that we can synthesize across all these different communities and cultures, we're going to be that much better, because we'll be talking about the same things.
Esperanto? Esperanto? No, I'm kidding. Have you heard of that? There's a proposal for a universal language, but maybe translation, at least to start.
I can do Pig Latin.
Wait, how does that work? Pig Latin?
Ixnay on the whatever thing, remember?
That's right. Are there any impediments to 8 billion people thinking together with today's web?
I think the internet is a tool, okay, and you provide access to a tool, and whether people use the tool or not is then up to them, and how they use the tool. So I'm only into chapter 3, and you keep screwing me up with so many different ideas, David, that I'm in a migratory mental state, but really, the internet is a tool. We're figuring out how to make the tool, useful and safe, and whatever those kind of attributes are for everybody, and then make it accessible. So securing the tool, enabling it, and giving access to the tool are two separate things. So, and then you've got whatever cultural things that are aspects of the access. So, from our standpoint, I think there's everybody on here is going to make the tool better and safer, and it's already available to everybody. We'll let somebody else worry about getting the accessing devices, the netbooks or computers or watches or whatever, to give people access to this safe and useful place. That's I don't know, it's a gut feel.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I would love to hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet. Do you have some thoughts on this? Is there anything in particular with today's web that makes it difficult for us to be thinking together?
Yeah, this is Suzanne. I'm going to tag on to what Rick was saying. That was a really good point. I think it's the ability for us as a user to be able to come into consensus about the filters that we use, and what can be controlled to shape our own digital experiences. So it's having a community where we could decide on these important filters that are needed.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Anyone else have any thoughts on what with today's web may be preventing? Okay, so Micah says, for me, I think we become better at thinking together by building shared understanding, listening to diverse perspectives, communicating openly, and aligning around common goals. Adi said consensus on filters, and that's very similar to what Suzanne just said. And Micah also added, when people have trust, context, reliable signals, and shared understanding, they can make better decisions and take meaningful action together. One thing that I wanted to point out is today's web is a web of silos. Everything is fractured and fragmented into these small, or some of them are large, but groupings of interactions that don't know anything about what's happening on any other page or any other site. So it's hard for me to think about how we could ever become good at thinking together if we can't even break through the silos. So a lot of the work that we've been talking about with the Metaweb is about how we can connect despite the fact that we're all in silos. And we've come up with the thought that this missing capability is to be able to essentially be together in a layer, because that is the first opportunity for people to even not be fragmented. If we have a layer, it's possible that everyone could actually be in the public layer of a tool like Canopy. Everybody, all 8 billion of people, could actually be in a tool like this without ever having to create a new identity, without ever having to go to a specific site, because when you're working with layers, essentially you're in it. You're in it wherever you are on the web. So that's
David, I think the fastest way to get here is that it has to be trusted, it has to be safe. Because today we're not only in silos, but we're bullied, it's threatening, it's insecure, it's, all of these things. If it's led by safety, security, and trust, it becomes a living entity in itself, a safe place for some place to go, where there isn't any threats, there isn't any harassments, there isn't any scams and systemic vulnerabilities, which I've experienced this past year. So it has to be a safe place where you just know it is safe, where you can go. And I think you get a complete community agreement that that's the space we want to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I think there's going to be different communities as well that may want slightly different flavors of it. But most communities are going to want something very similar, right? They're going to want trust, safety, transparency, to some extent, privacy, data sovereignty, etc. So one way to think about this work is that we are creating the possibility of new human capabilities. And when I say human capabilities, I mean collective capabilities. So you just mentioned trust. You mentioned security. Identity has an aspect of security. Safety is participation in governance. Context helps with safety. Trust helps with safety. So what we're saying here is that with the meta layer, we can actually extend what humans do. We can enable real trust in the digital world. We can enable governance as a human capability or a community capability. We can enable a stable identity as a human capability. We can enable the capability of having context and being able to participate in agency. And there's other things too, that presence. I mean, how could I forget that, right? That you can have a presence in the digital world. That's a new capability that we're enabling with a meta layer, or we can enable with a meta layer. Consent that's novel, right? This idea of having a human capability of consent in the digital world, and not just on one site, but just across the board, making that a capability. That's also interesting. And another capability is not only being accountable, but being able to hold others to be accountable for their actions. So these are human capabilities that today's web, it can't do any of these. I mean, you can have a pocket, one silo here or there that may have some aspects of these, but you can't have it across the web. That's the difference between what we're advocating for here, is the creation of human capabilities that you can use wherever you are in the digital world. Let's talk a little bit about how this infrastructure evolves. I think we did this in the first meeting, but I just want to be clear that, so we have this physical infrastructure with data centers, fiber networks, cell towers, satellites, etc. This is moving energy. We have an internet infrastructure layer that has networks and cloud compute and databases, etc. That's moving information. We have a web layer. That's what you experience as today's web, right? It's web, sites, apps, applications. These are moving interactions. The meta layer is different. It helps the civilization understand itself. And it's different than these other layers. These other layers, they understand what's beneath them. So they have these servers, they have a view of the physical infrastructure. These web applications, they have a view of the internet infrastructure that they can use. The meta layer has a view, not only a view of the web applications and also to a certain extent the internet infrastructure and protocols, but it also has a view of itself. That's one of the things that makes it different. And the other thing to note is that these different layers, they all have their different componentry and lexicon. I mean, at the bottom, we have things like fiber and network backbones, et cetera. And the internet infrastructure, we have servers and DNS, and the web and applications, we have social and shopping carts. In the meta layer, we have provenance, identity, context, community governance, privacy, identity, accountability. So you see, it's entirely different lexicon that we're dealing with, and we're also dealing with self-awareness on this meta layer, which is different than, and it's not to say that the meta layer itself is self-aware, but it allows for awareness of other componentry on this same layer.
David, this is a great graphic. It's really evolving. One of the things that I notice is when you say move energy, move information, move interaction, I'm thinking of moving meaning essentially for the meta layer itself, where we're coming together just to be consistent. But I love the graphic representation and how you presented it.
So the meta layer moves meaning. I like that too. Yeah, awesome. All right. Let's talk a little bit about someone who's been a big inspiration for me, and I know Dee as well, and some other people on this call. There was a visionary, and he lived in the late 1800s to the mid 1900s, and his name was Teilhard de Chardin. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He was a Jesuit priest, paleontologist, anthropologist, explorer, author. What wasn't he, right? I mean, he did a lot of things. And one of the more interesting aspects of his work was on what we call the noosphere. And he worked with someone named Kandinsky. And they had this theory that evolution will continue through consciousness. So consciousness can evolve, our collective consciousness can evolve. And he saw this construct called the omega point. And that was not when everything is perfect, not when everyone is completely aligned, but more so where we've evolved to a high level of consciousness and a high level of complexity, and it's able to work together in what he considered to be a convergent consciousness. And what's interesting about a convergent consciousness, it is the idea that we can coordinate without collapsing diversity. So this is really, for me, a very interesting way of thinking about our problems. What does that mean to coordinate without collapsing diversity? That means if we have, let's say that we're just got two people in this conversation, and it's me and someone, let's say, from China. So if we're going to coordinate, we're going to be having a conversation between the two of us. And if we're not going to collapse diversity, we're going to be able to bring all of our different perspectives. I'm from the US, they're from China. We have totally different worldviews and governance that we have to adhere to, etc. But can we come together in a conversation and in some way coordinate where neither of us has to give up who we are? And if you extend that to a higher level and say, well, if you have 8 billion people and we're in all these different groupings and tribes and everything, how can we coordinate in a way that has peace and harmony and everybody's getting enough food and people are having a right livelihood? How can we do that in a way where everyone can be themselves? They can maintain their values, they can present their perspectives and express themselves and be heard and understood, etc. So it's a tall order, right? I mean, we can't even begin to think about doing it right now because we can't even get on we can't even be on the same page speaking the same language at the moment. Let me step back and speak a little bit about what the noosphere is, just in case there are some people who are not familiar, which probably is the case unless you've been to one of our earlier presentations, workshops, or you've read a little bit on it. So the idea is that the Earth started out as a geosphere, so that's the rocks, and then a biosphere formed, so that's the animals and us and the plants. We externalize, we begin thinking, right? And that's the noosphere. The noosphere is that layer of planetary thought and collective intelligence. And we began in that process of thinking, we started building tools. And out of that, over millennia, we've developed a technosphere. And the technosphere is all the tooling that we have, and that in turn has defined our digital noosphere. So the digital noosphere is all the thought that is being captured by our technosphere at the moment. And I would like to just point out that the digital noosphere that we have right now was not planned at all. People had some great ideas in the 80s and even before about how we could connect, and they built the internet. And then in the early 90s, late 80s, that started developing into some ideas about the web, and those started being developed in earnest in 1990, 1991, 92 area. We started having browsers. And basically, we had that transition after about 10 years to from Web 1.0, which was publishing, to Web 2.0, which was social and mobile. And then we've moved on to Web 3, but none of this was really planned. This is not intentional. So we have what we have from an unintentional process at the moment. And it is a digital noosphere. Right now, it's mainly what we have on web pages and social media. But the question is, can we become wiser together than apart? Because right now, the way our technosphere works and our digital noosphere reflects is we're essentially doing things more or less on our own. Yes, social media has other people, but still we interact and develop the things that we post on our own. We use AI on our own. We post, sometimes people read it, sometimes they don't, but it's very much a process where we're interacting with small groups of people in silos. And the question is, again, can we become wiser together? What does that look like? And the noosphere it's a vision of how that can actually happen. We, meaning the Meta Layer Initiative, has developed what we're calling the Teilhard test, the Turing test, which was to understand if machines can mimic humans. Well, we're pretty sure that in many cases that machines can mimic humans very well. Not necessarily saying that in all cases that it can fool everybody, but it can fool most people most of the time. And in fact, I've been seeing some studies that say that people are more convinced by AI, or can be more convinced by certain AIs than other humans. So we're proposing that, okay, well, the Turing test, very important, probably the most influential thought experiment ever in AI history, but we need another one. We need one that judges us. Are we ready for the power that we are unleashing? And so the Teilhard test is evaluating new systems and us as humanity. And it says, well, if we brought this new system into being, would it afford us more self-awareness? Would it help us see ourselves as a whole? That, like Carlo just said, would it enable more coordination without coercion? Can it help turn insights into aligned action at scale? Does it provide more voice? Does it allow for the preservation of diversity, where people can continue being who they are with their own perspectives and values? Does it scale accountability with power? So as power grows, does accountability and responsibility grow as well? This is something that we're in process with, and we're anticipating doing a fair amount more research on it. But I think the key thing to note is that the meta layer does very well on the Teilhard test, because it helps us become more self-aware. It helps with coordination without coercion. It has the potential to preserve diversity, and it can allow for more accountability and responsibility. So what is the meta layer's role then? Well, it's to bring together people, not users, participants, enable them to form communities, enable relationships between different people, communities, between different pieces of information, between information and interactions, and creating through that a shared context. And shared context, like shared accountability, shared reality anchors, things that we can all look at and see. This is super important. And this forms perhaps the basis for a new collective intelligence. And I would say that the meta layer's real role in this is to build an intentional digital noosphere that is focused on unlocking collective intelligence, unlocking coordination without collapsing diversity, unlocking cooperation and collaboration, and people meeting each other, meeting people that they need to meet when they need to meet them on pages of their common interests, and forming relationships and forming shared context that builds knowledge. This is what we want to do and what we're striving to do intentionally through this process of desirable properties, defining the desirable properties, and then we're going to develop requirements and make architectural decisions and ultimately create a meta layer substrate that allows anyone to easily create meta layer applications that enable coordination, collaboration, interaction, etc. Any questions before we move on from this slide? All right. We talked about some different human capabilities that we'd like to add. So we had trust and context and accountability, and we were saying that the meta layer enables that. Well, I'd like to bring up another one. And this one, I bring it up separately because it wasn't actually touched upon. Well, it wasn't presented deeply in the book. And there's been a lot of forward progress since the book, both within the meta layer initiative, but also in the external work, in the external world with respect to collective memory. And I want to be clear that this is really about digital artifacts. So our collective memory is about creating meaningful, durable digital artifacts that will serve as shared reality anchors and therefore provide a baseline collective memory that is available to everyone. And this can only happen in a meta layer. And rather than just moving on, I've said, well, hey, we need this new human capability of collective memory. Let's talk a little bit about it. Okay, I need someone to quickly tell me an ancient civilization that they're particularly interested in. One person. Just yell it out.
The Vikings.
The Vikings.
The
Okay.
Vikings.
But when were the Vikings? Do you have a sense?
Oh gosh, not really. I mean,
medieval times, more or less?
Before that, right? It was before medieval times.
Like 900 or something?
Yeah, and the ingenuity in building those kinds of boats, with the tools that they had at the time. And, just the architectural feats that they did to be able to survive in those kinds of climates and things. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah, and they also had tremendous success in terms of war and conquering other lands. They were forced to be reckoned with for sure, right? Here's something that I'd like to just put out there as a thought experiment. And, maybe someone can comment on this. What if ordinary people in the times of the Vikings were able to preserve their important thoughts for less than the price of a cup of coffee? What would that mean for us? Anyone have any thoughts?
I think we'd be more advanced with our vessels and things. I would hope less advanced in war. I mean, yes, they were pretty brutal conquerors, but I'm more interested in what they built with what they had and how they survived. And also the redhead gene that makes it hard for anesthesiologists to knock you out, because that would be great to know why, for my son's sake.
And so would you agree that if we had ordinary Vikings preserving information on a regular basis when important things happen, we'd probably know a lot more about them? And then you also pointed out that we might be making decisions differently now, or over history, over recorded time, we might have made different decisions because we would have had the more information about how the Vikings had approached
we would understand their original intent because they would write that down. And and the purpose and what issues they dealt with in trying to solve a problem of their time. And I think today, when we think about Vikings or any other civilization, we're largely guessing, beginning with time period, beginning with, just the breadcrumbs that are left for us to look at today. And I think if they had the capability of tracking and preserving that knowledge at the point in time that it was all happening, it would be a much richer exercise for us to look at that and learn from it and base our current decisions on real facts that they themselves, the original authors, put down.
Thank you. Yes. Anyone else have any other thoughts about this? Okay. One other aspect of the thought experiment. What if we had that capability, or let's actually stay back in the Vikings. Okay. Is it also possible that the Vikings would behave differently if they knew that the other Vikings were, and maybe even perhaps other peoples, were preserving information on a regular basis that was important to them? Like, I guess what I'm saying is, would the Vikings and other peoples, would they actually have a different culture if everybody was preserving important information? What do you think? Anybody?
I think they would. One, because they would benefit from the shared intelligence that they're gaining. Maybe they went through some fortification and they wrote that down. And then the Vikings wanted to actually beef up their fortification. They could learn from them. So learning will accelerate the engineering and design process for them. But I also think that it might also do the opposite of, we don't want to be like them. We want to preserve our cultural identity and just use it as a source of comparison, but not necessarily of adoption.
Yeah, no, great point. And I want to add in one more thing. And this is my belief. If the people in the Viking era, Vikings and non-Vikings, knew that other people from themselves would be recording information, and also that everybody would have access to all the information, I think that they might actually act differently. Like in an argument or a conversation, some kind of discourse with some type of controversy is different if you know that the person you're having that conversation with is going to record it. And it's also different if you know that you both have access to the same facts. You have the same reality anchors. Like our conversation, their conversation is going to be different because they know that they have to reference the same information that they know you have access to. And I guess go ahead.
Fact is much different than saving a context. So I think the meta layer would give it context, and that would contribute to authenticity of the data.
Yeah.
I had a thought come to mind. So if we have just looking at one particular, currently a silo, like the thing that comes to mind is the COVID vaccines. Okay. So there's all sorts of controversy over of those, and there's all sorts of dialogue that didn't happen in the past, but could happen now, and reference articles to support positions on either one side or the other side, opinion pieces, dialogue posts, like you just have a conversation, so you've got tweets, if you will, or maybe something a little bit bigger like a Facebook post, maybe some kind of posting of whatever. So all that stuff is in this one, currently a silo of on a website. Well, if you look beyond, a few weeks and you go out 10 years, the quantity of those posts is going to be, in seven figures. And so there's nobody that's going to read through that seven-figure quantity of posts, and you're going to need something like AI to sort through it and summarize it for you. Can that be done? Can it be done accurately and successfully? That's great, but that now you basically spread that out to the entire width of the internet, and it's like, holy smokes, man, that's a lot of drivel that's going to be out there that needs to be summarized and categorized and be made accessible some way, and the sheer quantity of that stuff is going to be hard for me to get my hands around as to how that actually gets dealt with in the meta layer. In terms of being able to access information through the meta layer and have the meta layer add value to
Meaning.
to sort through all that kind of stuff. Make it available, but sort through it.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. And I think that's one of the reasons that AI will be integral to certain aspects of the meta layer. And at the same time, we just want to make sure that we don't give all the agency to AI and we remain with a human-centered focus. I think I will sum up this piece to say that preservation can definitely change behavior. It can change how we view situations, the intention that we bring into the situation, and ultimately it can change culture as we are preserving more and more information. And Rick makes a great point. Like, we would end up with so much information, right? Like, it's too much. It's already too much information. But here's the thing. We're beginning to think about what we're calling memory stewardship. This is covered by the new Desirable Property 2020, Desirable Property 22, which is, what is it? Something in epistemic continuity. So digital artifacts in epistemic continuity, I believe. I'm not totally sure, but that's easily find outable. But the point here is that it's not so much now about like just saving the information, because you can do that in social media. And as Rick was saying, we end up with a ton of it. It's figuring out what actually deserves to survive, what information should be preserved, what information do we want to make sure is available a decade from now, 2 decades from now, 10 decades from now, 3 millennia from now. That's the thing that we are now focused with. We're not having any problems saving information from an ephemeral standpoint, but we have now the curation opportunity to decide what we actually want to preserve. Because everything that's on this web right now, first of all, it doesn't all deserve to be preserved. And it's not going to be preserved. A lot of it isn't going to be preserved just because how the web is organized and structured at the moment. I've been playing with an idea. This is just a parenthetical thought I wanted to put out there. I'm really interested in doing an experiment where I essentially preserve a piece of information every day, something that I think is particularly important and deserves to be preserved for future generations. And I'm just wondering, I haven't quite made the commitment to it yet, but my hypothesis is if we were to do this, save, preserve information on a regular basis, that it would actually create some very interesting dynamics. So it's an experiment that I'm very interested in doing. And if there's anyone else who happens to think this would be an interesting thing to try, I would welcome communication around it, and we could do an experiment. All right, back on track. We've been talking a lot about capabilities today and really extending human capabilities. I know it's been more than 3 that we've talked about, but I think we can zoom out and think of 3 new capabilities that some of these aspects of the meta layer are going to help with, and they cover the larger group of capabilities that I talked about earlier. So I'm just going to say AI can help us think. So that's what Rick was just talking about. It can help us do synthesis and pattern matching. It can help us evaluate things. It can help us do a lot, right? The meta layer, on the other hand, it helps us coordinate. Because right now we're all in these silos, and we can't coordinate across the silos effectively at the moment. Memory stewardship, which we were just talking about, so digital artifacts, etc., they help us remember. And remembering is very important to coordinating and thinking, right? I mean, if you can't remember, you don't have a good memory base, then how are you going to think very well? If you can't remember, how are you going to coordinate over time? Together, these all provide the conditions for human flourishing. Does that mean if we create a layer that everybody's going to flourish? Absolutely not. Doesn't mean that. But what what I am optimistic is if we can push this forward and define very strong desirable properties and then translate those into requirements, and then ultimately into a substrate of code that enables this coordination and allows for bounded AI to help us think, and it remembers things. It essentially provides the capacity and capability for memory stewardship, that these things coming together, this is a recipe for human flourishing, and we have that opportunity now. This is what I'm seeing. Does anyone have any thoughts, comments, reflections, questions?
You had a diagram earlier, well, a list where you ended up with intentional digital noosphere. And I think when you map that out in the three bubbles, you're actually moving towards that design. And when you have AI by itself, because this graphic here is super in that it simplifies all the conversations we've had around how AI will enable us to think better, with more convenience, with more efficiencies and so forth. But then when you look at the meta layer, it helps us coordinate, but you still need to enable the power of AI to help with that coordination. And that's that bounded AI. So it doesn't just go rogue, without having some really strong guardrails there. And then I still think you need AI to help you with the memory stewardship, but that also adds in some of the, what we're calling current capabilities of preservation, so that we can anchor some of our foundational understanding so that doesn't get altered, but it can get interpreted with layers above it. So there's another area where AI can be utilized again as a tool to help us get to that real optimal design and intentional design for a digital noosphere. I brought up, in several sessions ago, the notion of noospheric threading, where, maybe an idea is in parallel being conceived in different communities. How do you bring that together more powerfully so that we're learning from both of those communities that are concerned with that concept or that idea, and the threading that's needed to say where it originated, not in just time and place, but the credible sources that were contributing to that. How can they come together? And they didn't know or find each other other than through this Metaweb. It's a beautiful story if we can connect those potential collaborations from the get-go and bridge their learning and understanding and future work together. And if AI can enable all of that seems like that's the most ideal scenario, is that we share when we want to. I did put a note up in the chat that I can see where some societies or communities may not want to openly share their intelligence. For whatever reason, I threw out a few not altruistic motivations there, but we have to be cognizant of that as well, that some things are not going to be out there for whatever intellectual property, some advantages, some, there might be some profit considerations and so forth, that you're not going to find readily available. We just need to know how to deal with that when we get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a lot of really good points, and one of them makes me think that this diagram might even be better if all three of the circles were overlapping and you had kind of a part in the middle where all three overlap, and you have I think you all probably can picture what I'm talking about, but it basically says, that the AI, the meta layer, and the memory stewardship are all, they're needed for each other to actually work best in the way for human flourishing. Let's see. So in terms of some communities not wanting to share, it's not only going to be the profit motive and other similar, but also there is a trend right now through the internet for people to be retreating to smaller spaces where it's not as many people, it's more familiar people, and it's more people of greater alignment. So that is certainly also going to be a reason why not everything will be shared. That being said, some of the things that we're envisioning with respect to the meta layer, like bridges, they transcend community. I believe that there's, at the moment, my current thinking is that there's no reason for there to be private bridges, although there could be some, but you know, it's something that we probably over time as a community need to deal with. But my desire is for pretty much all bridges to be available. I guess if someone's creating something personal in their own personal graph, I guess that might be okay. But anyway, yeah, you make a good point. And it is something that I think over time we're going to understand that better, and we're going to probably want to create ways for people to share information that has been developed within more private communities. And that may mean that, I don't want to go too much further into that, but I do want to just say, I think it's something that we can over time.
We need to acknowledge that may be a case that we need to consider.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so what are we talking? We're really talking about a human-centered, pro-social future. I think pretty much all of us know what human-centered is, right? I would say human-centered means that the humans have the rights. Like, we have a right to privacy, data sovereignty, transparency, safety, context, consent, all these things. If we have those rights, then it's a human-centered environment. If it's focused on making sure that we are afforded those rights, then it's good, right? And pro-social, in my mind, means that the whole purpose of it is to create positivity in the world. What does that mean? Well, we want to create an internet that's trustworthy. We want to create one that's participatory, so where people have agency. We want to create one that has enduring aspects, that has a collective memory, that can be the collective memory that bottom lines our collective thinking, our collective intelligence. So we invite you, the people who've been meeting for the last year as the MetaLayer Guild, invite you to join us. There's room for all kinds of people, technical, non-technical, builders, educators, community organizers, artists, etc. We need it all. And the guild is really just an indication that you're available and interested in participating in some aspect of the MetaLayer work. There's many different verticals. You can go on the GovHub and see that you can participate in the Overweb, in Canopy, which is the first MetaLayer tool, in the Metaweb layer, which is the big one that's focused on, which essentially the whole space above the web. But that particular layer, from a governance standpoint, is focused on the desirable properties. And we'd love to have you all join us. This link goes into the MetaLayer Guild, where you can just express your interest and join on our governance hub. We're just opening this up right now. It's not the only way. I think if someone is able to put the Discord link in the chat, because I actually think that would be a very helpful link and just another way to bring yourself into this community, into the guild. So anyone can join, and really it's all about just having some intention to participate and help with the shaping of this next level of the internet. There's many different ways to contribute. Of course, for most people, you're going to need to learn something. What we're talking about. Many of you on this call probably are somewhere already down the learning path and beginning to participate and potentially to start contributing. So contribution that could be providing ideas about how to revise the desirable properties. It could be coming up with a new idea for a MetaLayer application. It could actually be building a new smart tag. So there's many different things that you could do. And what we'd like to see is people progressing from learning, participating, contributing, and then beginning to help lead and bringing other people in and helping mentor other folks. And then actually what we're calling the steward role, which is someone who is participating at a very high level, providing leadership when necessary, providing contribution. Essentially, they are helping steward some aspect of the meta layer so that it can express and manifest in its highest level. And how can you contribute? Well, ideas. Ideas are a starting point. But you can also begin to prototype things. You can create artifacts. You can ultimately, if things start working, we can create a governance pattern around them. We can create learning loops. We can form community practices. So there's a lot that can be done. And the important thing is that we're progressing from understanding what the meta layer can be to what it actually, what we can create, how we can create this new commons that provides the capabilities that we've been speaking about today.
And David, may I just add that continuum from understanding to creating is also overlaid with a parallel where we're asking people to challenge and ask questions that will help us address whether this is easy to consume the information that we're presenting and easy to engage, because we want it highly participatory and easy to engage at any level of understanding. So there doesn't have to be this requisite that's really heavy. You want to get involved because, one, you're curious and you've got questions. That also helps us sort of push the envelope in terms of simplifying the information so it's self-explanatory is what we ultimately want to get to, so that we can get into the more complex areas and the more creative design areas where we can all have fun realizing some of the ideas that we just come up with in conversation. It's pretty amazing. And a shout out to David. There are some things that I've experienced being a learner on the Metaweb course, and I would just text David and then he builds it in and makes it very doable to continue to provide those kinds of enhancements, if you will. And it's just all related to that human interface. We want it to be smooth. We want it to be self-explanatory, very intuitive, so that every day when you're participating on the Metaweb, it's very natural for you to want to contribute ideas and not get technically bound up in where do I find this button and that button. But that ease of use is informed by maybe the simplest questions that you have, like, where do I do this? And that helps us. So please don't think that there's a high requirement for you to engage in this process. We want everybody's attention and ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dee. And I want to also say that we're striving for ease of use, and we're also a work in progress. So some of you may have noticed that there were times when the canopy wasn't working or the login didn't work. We've been doing our best to keep that up and running. We noticed some things this morning. So if you were having any issues this morning, please do a hard refresh and you should be good. And as things happen, if there are any issues, please use the support tab within the coursework activity to reach out and let us know where you're having issues.
Okay, we have 7 minutes, David. So you want to wrap us up and then prime us for next week?
Yeah, so we're almost done. One of the more important things that we've been working on in the last 2 years is the desirable properties. You've probably heard me mention it. We started from a challenge by Vint Cerf on September 16th, 2020. And he said, if you want to create this new thing with these new capabilities, then you need to define the desirable properties of it. What do you want it to be? We took his advice, and it's 21 months in the making, but we have a set of 22 desirable properties. They are on the governance hub, the govhub.live. and you can help us evolve those. Love your insights on those specific desirable properties that you're interested in. Some of you might be interested in identity, others in safety, some in data sovereignty or context or privacy, etc. All of the desirable properties need attention, and we're looking in the next week to sign people up to work groups that are focused on a specific desirable property that you're interested in. We're looking for co-leads and team members for the work groups. And these work groups will essentially be the group that helps take the current 0.77 version, 0.77 version of the desirable properties and all the submissions that we're going to get from the Desirable Properties Challenge, which starts on July 16th, going through August 30th. So 45 days. We're going to get a bunch of input, hopefully a lot of suggestions about how to improve them, comments, and also specific recommendations of changes. And the work group is going to then use our community AI model to synthesize those and make decisions on what goes in the version 1 of the desirable properties of a meta layer, which will be published on September 16th, September 18th, 2026. So basically 2 years after the initial meeting, we're going to be doing that. And if you want to find out more about desirable properties, go to desirableproperties.org. There's still some little changes that we'll be making with respect to the on-chain aspects of it, but for the most part, it has a lot of information there that you can find out about the challenge. And I mentioned the MetaLayer Summit. We will be putting out the first version of the desirable properties at the MetaLayer Summit. You can scan this code. We're opening up the event list now. So yeah, if you have a point later on today, please go ahead and join the event. It's gonna be historic because, like I said, we're not only going to be doing a retrospective on what has been accomplished in the MetaLayer initiative in the first couple of years, we'll be demonstrating where we're at with Canopy, and we'll also be launching this Desirable Properties book, which I hope many of you will be contributors to, and that will be through the Desirable Properties Challenge that I just mentioned, and we'll be sending more information to people who are registered in the course and who have been attending these meetings. One last note about the certification course. So tomorrow is the last day to register for cohort 1, which is kind of historic, right? I mean, it's the first cohort of the certification course. So there's going to be a little goodness for being part of cohort 1. So if you know anyone who might want to join this self-paced course, please let them know to register by tomorrow. Everybody who has either already registered or who registers by tomorrow will have up to July 31st to complete their course. That means turning in everything by the 31st of July so that we can issue your certificate. And if you would like to register for the course, you can use the code Digital Mason for the special cohort 1 price that will also extend to cohort 2. And if that is too much for you now because you're from a developing country or you have some circumstances that require some help, please contact me. Also, we do have a discount for people who are Internet Society members. So again, please contact me. You can go to this link, course.metawebbook.com, or you can scan this QR code. Wow.
Another great session, David. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dee, for your support in keeping this thing moving. And let's see, are there any comments that you think that we need to address before we get off?
I think you're going to receive another invitation for next week, so we can do just an open Q&A. No more presentations from us, but just a Q&A, and then we're going to talk more deeply about desirable properties, because that's the next level of deep dive that we want to take you through and get you involved in. So that's what's going to happen for the next week's agenda at 11:30
Yes, thank you.
Pacific.
So the last thought I want to leave you with is the meta layer doesn't tell humanity where to go. It helps us find our way there together.
Indeed.
And I'm super excited about going there with all of you, and look forward to seeing you next week, and also in the book in Canopy. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. And yeah, we'll see you in Canopy.